The crisp October air nipped at my cheeks as I wandered through Scottsdale's biggest flea market. My weekend ritual of hunting vintage treasures felt different today. Maybe it was the way sunlight filtered through autumn leaves, or maybe fate had other plans. "Damn, this is perfect," I whispered, spotting a leather-bound book collection. As a morning show host, I cultivated a certain image, but my true passion lay in these dusty treasures. My fingers traced the spine of an old volume when something else caught my eye. A vintage Rolleiflex camera sat on a weathered table, its twin lenses gleaming like cat eyes. I reached for it, my heart skipping when another hand touched mine. Looking up, I met the greenest eyes I'd ever seen. "Sorry," we said simultaneously. The stranger smiled, and my world tilted slightly. She had dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders, wearing a casual blazer that screamed media professional. "You know cameras?" she asked, withdrawing her hand. "Trinity Brown," I introduced myself, trying to ignore the lingering warmth where our hands had touched. "And yes, I collect vintage ones." Her eyes widened slightly. "The morning show host? I'm Emerson Price, executive producer at Channel 8. The rival station, perfect. Yet something about her drew me in. "Join me for coffee?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Minutes later, we sat at a corner cafe, the camera between us like a peace offering. Emerson's laugh was infectious as she shared stories about production disasters. "Your 7 a.m. segment about urban gardening," she smirked, "gave our ratings team nightmares." "Competitive much?" I teased, watching her stir her latte. Time slipped away as we talked about everything and nothing. The camera forgotten, we discovered shared tastes in classic films and obscure books. Her presence felt familiar, like finding a missing puzzle piece. "Take it," she finally said, pushing the camera toward me. "No, you saw it first. I insist. Besides," she smiled mysteriously, "gives me an excuse to see you again." Walking home later, camera in hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. The autumn wind whispered through trees, carrying promises of change. Little did I know, this camera would unlock secrets that would change both our lives. As I examined it that evening, a folded paper slipped from its case, the corner of what appeared to be a diary page, yellowed with age. The handwriting was elegant, dated 1962. One line caught my eye. "My dearest Elizabeth, if only we lived in different times." I had no idea then that this diary would unravel a love story that mirrored my own unexpected journey. That night, I dreamed of green eyes and vintage cameras, of hidden diaries and untold stories. Sometimes the best stories find us when we least expect them. In a crowded flea market on an autumn morning in Scottsdale. Monday morning hit differently after my flea market encounter. The studio lights felt harsher, the makeup heavier. My producer's voice crackled through my earpiece. "Trinity, ratings just came in. Channel 8's morning segment is breathing down our necks." I couldn't help but smile, imagining Emerson behind those numbers. Our paths hadn't crossed since the market, but her presence lingered in my thoughts. The vintage camera sat on my desk, a daily reminder. "Their new health segment is killing us." Sarah, my assistant, dropped a stack of reports on my desk. "Producer's some hotshot named Price." "Emerson Price," I said, the name slipping out like honey. Sarah raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The following weeks became a ratings war. Each morning I'd check Channel 8 segments, finding myself studying their production style. Emerson's touch was evident, creative angles, intimate storytelling. She was damn good at her job. Then came the charity gala. Both stations covering the same event meant collision was inevitable. I spotted her across the room, commanding attention in a black dress. Our eyes met, and the room seemed to shrink. "Stealing our camera angles now?" She approached, champagne in hand. "Honey, we invented those angles," I shot back, heart racing at her proximity. We ended up in the parking garage, arguing about interview techniques. The concrete walls echoed our heated words until suddenly, space between us vanished. Her lips found mine, tasting of champagne and unspoken desires. The kiss was electric, inevitable. We jumped apart at distant footsteps. "This can't happen," she whispered, but her eyes said otherwise. The next week was torture. Every industry event became an exercise in avoidance. Our shows competed fiercer than ever, but now the competition felt personal, charged with something deeper. "Your interview with the mayor was impressive," her text read one night. Your coverage made me look amateur, I replied. Impossible. These messages became our secret language. Professional rivalry by day, hidden conversations by night. But the tension was building, threatening to explode. During a press conference, our crews set up side by side. I felt her eyes on me throughout my segment. Later, she cornered me in the hallway. This is affecting my work, she said, keeping professional distance. Mine too. The admission cost me. We should stay away from each other. But we both knew that was impossible. The pull between us was magnetic, dangerous. Every accidental touch, every shared glance in industry meetings felt like playing with fire. The vintage camera sat on my desk, watching this dance of denial. Inside it, the diary page remained hidden, its secrets waiting to surface. If only I'd known then how our professional rivalry would pale compared to the story about to unfold. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to really look at the diary page. The paper felt fragile, like the walls I'd built around my heart. As I unfolded it carefully, more pages slipped out, bringing with them the weight of history and hidden love. The last text of the night came from her. Sometimes I wish we'd never met at that market. I replied, no you don't. Her response took hours. You're right, I don't. Sleep eluded me as I lay thinking about rivalry, desire, and vintage cameras. About how sometimes the things we run from are exactly what we need. The diary pages sat on my nightstand, waiting to tell their story, while I wrestled with my own. The diary pages trembled in my hands as I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor. The vintage camera that had brought Emerson into my life now revealed its secrets in elegant, faded script. My dearest Elizabeth, each entry began. My grandmother's handwriting flowed across yellowed pages, telling a story of forbidden love in 1960s Scottsdale. A story about her and another woman, a woman named Catherine Price. My phone buzzed. Emerson. Can't sleep thinking about you. I stared at the message, then back at the diary. Price. The same surname couldn't be coincidence. My hands shook as I typed. Need to see you. Important. We met at midnight in my apartment. Emerson looked exhausted but beautiful, her hair slightly messy from running her fingers through it, a nervous habit I'd noticed. Catherine Price, I said, showing her the diary. Was she your grandmother? The color drained from her face as she read. Where did you find this? In the camera. Your camera. Hours passed as we read together, shoulders touching. The story unfolded, two women, deeply in love, forced apart by society. My grandmother Rose and her Catherine, meeting in secret, sharing stolen moments. They were together for 3 years, Emerson whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Until my grandfather found out. The diary detailed their final meeting in a garden behind the old library. They chose duty over love, married men they didn't love, raised families in the same town, always apart, always yearning. Emerson's hand found mine in the dim light. The touch sparked something primal, urgent. Our lips met softly at first, then with desperate hunger. Clothes fell away as years of repressed desire surfaced. Later, tangled in sheets, Emerson traced patterns on my skin. History's repeating itself, she murmured. No, I turned to face her. We're writing our own story. The diary entries continued through the years. Secret messages passed through mutual friends. Glimpses at social events. Children's birthdays where they maintained polite distance while their hearts screamed. My mother never understood why Grandma Rose spent so much time in her garden, I said, reading about their code, different flowers planted as messages of love. Catherine had a camera collection. Emerson laughed softly. The one we found, they must have used it to pass notes. Dawn crept in as we pieced together our shared history. Two families, intertwined by a love story buried in time. Now here we were, their granddaughters in each other's arms. What happens now? Emerson asked, her professional mask slipping to reveal vulnerability. I kissed her shoulder, tasting possibility. We honor them by living truthfully. The morning show would start in hours. We'd return to being rivals, but something fundamental had shifted. The weight of our grandmother's sacrifice settled around us like a blanket. Stay, I whispered as she moved to leave. Just a little longer. She hesitated, then settled back into my embrace. Outside, Scottsdale was waking up, unaware that within these walls, past and present had collided, creating something beautiful and terrifying. The diary sat on my nightstand, its pages holding decades of hidden love. But unlike Rose and Catherine, we had a choice. The question was, were we brave enough to make it? Emerson's phone buzzed, work calling, reality intruding. But as she dressed, her eyes never left mine, carrying promises we hadn't yet voiced but both felt deep in our souls. The morning after our discovery, everything at the studio felt surreal. My mind kept drifting to Emerson, to the diary, to our tangled family history. The teleprompter words blurred as I thought about Rose and Catherine's stolen moments. "Trinity, you're distracted," my producer warned during commercial break. If he only knew. A message from Emerson lit up my phone. "Meet me at my office, 8 p.m. We need to talk." Channel 8's building loomed before me that evening, its windows glowing against the darkening sky. The security guard recognized me, smirking as he waved me through. Apparently rivalry made for good gossip. Emerson's office suited her, minimalist but warm, with vintage movie posters and a wall of awards. She stood by the window, silhouetted against city lights. "I found more," she said without turning. "In my grandmother's attic." A box sat on her desk, filled with photographs, letters, pressed flowers. Catherine had kept everything, hidden away like buried treasure. "They loved each other for 40 years, Emerson's voice cracked. "Never stopped." The photos showed glimpses of shared history, our grandmothers at society events, standing apart but their eyes always finding each other. Christmas parties, summer barbecues, a lifetime of longing captured in stolen glances. "This could ruin us," Emerson said softly. "If the stations found out." I crossed the room, turned her to face me. "Let them." Her lips met mine with fierce urgency. The kiss deepened as years of our grandmother's repressed love echoed through us. Papers scattered as she pressed me against her desk. "Wait," she pulled back, breathing hard. "The diary. We should preserve their story." We spent hours organizing the materials chronologically. Each letter, each photo revealed more about their hidden romance. They'd created a language of subtle signals, certain flowers and buttonholes, specific brooches worn to send messages. "Look at this," I held up a letter from 1975. "They met secretly every first Tuesday in the library's rare book room." "The library where we film community segments," Emerson realized. "We've been walking in their footsteps without knowing." A photograph from 1980 showed them at a charity gala, standing with their husbands but sharing a secret smile. Just like us at industry events, hiding behind professional facades. "I'm tired of hiding," Emerson said suddenly. "Aren't you?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Our careers, our reputations, everything we'd built could crumble. But hadn't our grandmothers sacrificed enough for both families? "Rose wrote about regret," I said, picking up the diary, "about choosing safety over love. I don't want that for us." Emerson's response was another kiss, softer this time, full of promise. Outside her office window, Scottsdale sparkled, unaware of the legacy of love being reclaimed within these walls. "Stay tonight," she whispered against my neck. Morning would bring complications, questions, consequences. But for now we had this, the truth of our hearts, the strength of our grandmother's enduring love, and the chance they never had. As we left her office, the box of memories came with us. These weren't just artifacts anymore, they were our inheritance, a torch passed down through generations. The weight of their story settled around our shoulders like a mantle. In my apartment later, we read more letters by lamplight. Each word strengthened our resolve. Rose and Catherine had lived a love story written in margins and shadows. But their granddaughters? We would write ours in bold, clear text. The vintage camera watched from its shelf, its secret mission finally complete. 2 generations, 1 love story, coming full circle in the heart of Scottsdale. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, right before I went on air. NBC New York senior anchor position. My hands trembled as I read the offer. 6 figures, national exposure. Everything I'd dreamed of. Everything except Emerson. 5 minutes to air, my producer called. I plastered on my professional smile, but my mind raced. New York meant leaving Scottsdale, leaving our grandmother's story, leaving her. Between segments, I noticed Emerson had texted, "Working on something big. Dinner tonight?" She'd transformed her living room into a makeshift editing suite when I arrived. Footage played on multiple screens, interviews with elderly couples, vintage photographs, Scottsdale in the 1960s. It's a documentary, she explained, eyes bright with excitement. About hidden love stories. About them. My heart clenched. Emerson? Before you say anything, she pressed play on her main monitor. The opening sequence showed the old library, the garden where our grandmothers met, the flea market where we found each other. It's beautiful, I whispered, the New York offer burning in my pocket. I want to tell their story, she said. Our story. The industry awards ceremony that weekend felt different. Usually a night of networking and rivalry, now it pulsed with unspoken tension. Emerson's documentary preview had created buzz. She looked stunning in deep green, commanding attention as she presented her upcoming projects. Our eyes met across the room, electricity crackling between us. Later in the hotel elevator we stood carefully apart, but when the doors closed she pressed me against the wall, lips finding mine with desperate intensity. My room? She breathed against my neck. Now. Hours later, tangled in hotel sheets, I finally told her about New York. The silence that followed felt endless. When did they need an answer? Her voice was carefully neutral. Next week. I traced patterns on her bare shoulder. But I don't think. You have to take it. She sat up, moonlight silvering her skin. It's your dream. Dreams change. The documentary footage played on her laptop, scenes of love surviving against odds. Our grandmothers had stayed in Scottsdale, lived half-lives to maintain appearances. Was leaving any better? We could do both, Emerson said suddenly. The documentary could open in New York. I have contacts. You'd leave Channel 8? For the right story? She smiled. In a heartbeat. Dawn found us still talking, planning, dreaming. The New York skyline could never compete with the way Emerson looked in morning light, passionate about our shared vision. The award ceremony's after-party buzzed with industry gossip. Someone had leaked Emerson's documentary concept. Whispers followed us, speculation grew. Let them talk, she said, squeezing my hand under the table. We left early, the weight of decisions and desire heavy between us. In the taxi home, Emerson outlined her plans, interviews, archives, hidden stories waiting to be told. Our grandmothers changed us, she said. Imagine how many other stories are out there waiting. The New York contract sat unopened in my email. Once it had represented everything I wanted. Now, watching Emerson's eyes shine with creative fire, I realized success meant something different. That night, we added our own chapter to the family story. Not in hidden gardens or secret letters, but in the open, under Scottsdale stars. The future stretched before us, uncertain but full of promise. Morning would bring decisions, challenges, change. But for now, we had this moment, this truth, this love story spanning generations. New York could wait. Some dreams are worth rewriting. Mother's intuition must be real, because she called the morning after I declined New York's offer. Trinity, darling, we need to talk. Thanksgiving dinner, no excuses. I hadn't planned on coming out to my family over turkey and cranberry sauce, but life rarely follows our plans, especially when your mother subscribes to both competing networks' programming. Who's this producer you've been seen with? She asked, carefully arranging place settings. The one from Channel 8? My hands froze on the wine glass. Emerson Price. Price? She paused. Any relation to Catherine Price? The room temperature seemed to drop. Her granddaughter. Mother's face tightened. History better not be repeating itself. What do you mean? Your grandmother rose. She hesitated. She and Catherine were close, too close. I know, I said quietly. I found her diary. The crystal bowl she was holding slipped, caught just in time. Outside, autumn leaves scattered across the lawn while inside, decades of secrets hung in the air. It nearly destroyed 2 families, she whispered. No, society's prejudice nearly destroyed them. Love wasn't the problem. The doorbell rang, Emerson, right on time. We'd agreed she should come, face this together. Mother's expression shifted from shock to resignation as I let her in. Dinner was excruciating. My father talked ratings and sports, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. My younger sister kept glancing between Emerson and me, piecing things together. Then Mother dropped her bombshell. I found letters. In the attic. Rose and Catherine. We know, Emerson said softly. We're making a documentary. The turkey grew cold as decades of family history unraveled. Mother revealed how she'd discovered the truth as a teenager, how it shaped her views on appropriate relationships. I wanted to protect you, she said, tears in her eyes. By making me afraid to love? The words came out sharper than intended. Emerson's hand found mine under the table. The touch anchored me as rain began pattering against windows, matching the tension in the room. I'm not ashamed, I stated, looking directly at my mother. And neither should Rose and Catherine have been. The storm outside intensified. We moved to the porch, watching lightning split the sky. Emerson stood close, her presence both comfort and defiance. Your career, Mother began, is stronger with Emerson beside me. The rain drove us inside, but not before Emerson kissed me, soft and sure, right there on my parents' porch. A kiss that said we wouldn't hide, wouldn't repeat our grandmother's pain. Later, in my old bedroom, we found more letters hidden behind loose wallpaper. Rose's writing never sent, "My darling Catherine, if only they understood that love knows no bounds." They understand now, Emerson whispered, holding me close as thunder rolled overhead. Morning brought weak sunshine and tentative peace. Mother hugged me goodbye, whispered, Rose would be proud. Driving home, Emerson said, well, that was intense? I was going to say liberating. She was right. The weight of family secrets had lifted, replaced by something lighter, hopeful. Our grandmother's love story had been a tragedy. Ours wouldn't be. That evening, we sat in my apartment, reading the newly discovered letters. Each one reinforced our resolve. Rose and Catherine had written their love in invisible ink. We would write ours in headlines. The storm had cleared, leaving Scottsdale's sky impossibly bright. Like our future, I thought, watching Emerson photograph the sunset. Some stories deserve to be told in full light. The email arrived like a thunderbolt on a clear day. Regarding Rose Thompson and Catherine Price comment, Channel 12's entertainment reporter had somehow caught wind of our documentary. They're digging, Emerson said, pacing my living room. Someone at the awards ceremony must have talked. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from industry contacts. The story was spreading. Rival network producers, forbidden love, family secrets exposed. Everything we'd planned to reveal on our own terms was threatening to explode. Channel 12 threatens to run the story tomorrow, my producer warned. This could tank our ratings. I found Emerson in her office, surrounded by documentary footage. The screen showed our grandmothers at a garden party, maintaining careful distance while their eyes told a different story. We can't let them sensationalize this, she said, not looking up. They'll turn it into cheap scandal. My station executives called an emergency meeting. Sitting in the boardroom, watching them discuss damage control, I felt Rose's strength flowing through me. I'm going to tell the story, I announced. On my show, tomorrow. Like hell you are, the network director snapped. This isn't some human interest piece. No, it's my life, my family, my choice. Emerson faced similar pressure at Channel 8. They wanted to suspend production on her documentary, bury the story before it buried them. We met at midnight in our spot, the old library garden. The same place where Rose and Catherine had said goodbye decades ago. But we weren't saying goodbye. Let's beat them to it, Emerson said, her eyes bright with determination. Tell the story our way. We worked through the night, combining her documentary footage with my journalism skills. Rose and Catherine's love story deserved more than tabloid headlines. Morning brought more threats. Both stations demanded our silence. Industry friends warned about career suicide. But sitting in my dressing room, holding Rose's diary, I knew what had to be done. 3 minutes to air, the stage manager called. Emerson appeared in the doorway. Ready? Together? She nodded, squeezing my hand. We'd decided she would direct this segment from the control room, bringing our personal and professional lives full circle. The red light blinked on. Millions of viewers watched as I began. Today's story is about love, about truth, about 2 women who lived in silence and their granddaughters who choose to speak. Photos appeared on screen, Rose and Catherine through the years, their hidden story revealed with dignity. Then newer images, Emerson and me at industry events, professional rivals harboring a deeper connection. 60 years ago, my grandmother wrote these words. I read from the diary. Love doesn't diminish when hidden. It grows stronger, waiting for light. Social media exploded. Phones rang off the hook. But in the control room, Emerson's voice in my earpiece remained steady, guiding me through our shared revelation. The segment ended with a simple truth. Their love survived in shadows, ours will thrive in sunlight. Afterward, chaos erupted. Network executives stormed the studio. Sponsors threatened to pull out. Conservative viewers flooded the switchboard. But something unexpected happened too. Support poured in. Other couples shared their stories. The dialogue we'd hoped to start had begun. In Emerson's apartment that night, surrounded by documentary materials, we watched the media storm unfold. Our careers hung in balance, but we felt strangely peaceful. Rose wrote about choosing safety over truth, I said, reading from the diary. We chose truth. Emerson smiled, pulling me close. They tried to write their story in visible ink. We're writing ours in neon. Outside, Scottsdale buzzed with our revelation. But here, in this moment, we had everything. Truth, love, and the chance to honor two women who paved our way with their quiet courage. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. But tonight, we celebrated the power of choosing love over fear, truth over safety, light over shadows. The documentary shoot transformed my grandmother's garden into a time capsule. Vintage furniture dotted the lawn, and photographs from the 1960s hung from tree branches, dancing in the autumn breeze. Rose planted these roses for Catherine, I explained to the camera. Each color held a message, red for passion, pink for longing, white for secret meetings. Emerson directed from behind the lens, her artistic vision bringing our grandmother's story to life. We'd spent weeks interviewing elderly neighbors who'd known them, piecing together their hidden romance. Mrs. Henderson remembers them dancing at the 1965 charity ball, Emerson said, reviewing footage. Always with their husbands, but their eyes never left each other. The library's rare book room became our next location. Dust motes danced in camera lights as we recreated their Tuesday meetings. I sat at their favorite table, holding Rose's diary. They would pretend to research, our elderly librarian recalled on camera. But I saw their hands touch over book pages, saw the looks they shared. Between takes, Emerson and I found ourselves drawn into their world. We discovered their favorite reading spot, the window seat where they'd sit close, pretending to discuss literature. I feel them here, Emerson whispered, her hand finding mine. The camera crew pretended not to notice as she pulled me close, kissing me softly among the ancient books. The most emotional interviews came from their old friends, now in their 80s. Many had kept their secret, carrying it for decades. They deserved happiness, Mrs. Patterson said tearfully. Society was cruel then, still can be. We filmed at the flea market next, where I'd found the camera that started everything. The vintage stall owner remembered Catherine's frequent visits. She bought every old camera she could find, he said. Now I know why. Each one carried messages to Rose. The documentary took shape, a love story told through objects, letters, and memories. But it became more than just our grandmother's story. It captured the evolution of love itself. During an interview about Rose's garden, Emerson's hand trembled on the camera. I knew why. We'd just discovered Catherine had planted the same flowers in her own garden, creating a secret language only they understood. You okay? I asked during a break. She nodded, eyes bright. Just thinking about how far we've come. They had to hide behind flowers and books. We get to tell their story. The most powerful moment came when we interviewed my mother. She spoke about discovering the truth as a teenager, about her journey from shame to acceptance. I watched my mother love in silence, she said, her voice breaking. Watching my daughter love openly heals something in me. Emerson called cut, wiping tears. Even the crew needed a moment. Later, reviewing footage in her editing suite, we found ourselves overwhelmed by the parallels. 2 love stories, 2 generations, one finally free to bloom in daylight. Look at this, Emerson said, freezing a frame. It showed our grandmothers at a garden party, standing apart but their shadows touching on the lawn. They found ways to show their love, I marveled. However they could. The documentary's final scene brought us back to the vintage camera that started everything. We placed it in the garden, surrounded by roses of every color. No more hidden messages, Emerson said, wrapping her arms around me as the crew packed up. No more secret codes. That evening, watching the sunset paint Rose's garden gold, we read from the diary one last time. Their words, once whispered in shadows, now echoed freely across time. The vintage camera sat between us, its mission complete. It had carried love notes between Rose and Catherine, and ultimately led their granddaughters to each other. They would have loved this, I said, watching Emerson edit footage. She smiled, pulling me closer. They do. I feel it every time we film. The garden glowed with evening light, roses nodding in the breeze. Somewhere, we knew, Rose and Catherine were smiling. The morning I decided to come out on live television, Scottsdale's temperature hit record highs. Fitting, since I was about to set the local media landscape on fire. "Are you sure about this?" my producer asked during makeup. The documentary preview had created buzz, but this was different. This was personal. Absolutely. I checked my reflection, adjusted my mic. Emerson had faced her board meeting yesterday. Now it was my turn. The studio lights felt hotter than usual. My regular cooking segment guest was chatting about autumn recipes, but my mind wandered to the speech written on cards in my lap. 2 minutes to the personal segment, the floor director called. My phone buzzed. Emerson, whatever happens, I'm proud of us. The red light blinked on. Millions of viewers watched as I set aside my usual script. Today, I'm breaking from our regular programming to share something personal, I began. Many of you have heard rumors about the documentary being produced by Channel 8's Emerson Price. Deep breath. No turning back. The story it tells isn't just about our grandmother's hidden love, it's about their granddaughters finding each other, finding truth, finding love. Social media exploded instantly. The control room erupted in chaos, but I continued. Emerson and I are more than professional rivals. We're partners, in life and in telling the story. Love shouldn't have to hide anymore. My hands shook, but my voice remained steady. Years of broadcasting experience kicked in as I shared our journey, the vintage camera, the diary, the legacy of love we'd inherited. To anyone watching who feels they need to hide their truth, you're not alone. Times have changed. Love is love. The segment ended. Silence fell over the studio, broken only by the hum of equipment. Then, surprisingly, applause from the crew. My phone exploded with notifications. Family, friends, viewers, messages poured in. Some supportive, some angry, all passionate. Across town, Emerson faced her own challenges. The Channel 8 board meeting had been called specifically to address our relationship and the documentary. "They're concerned about conflict of interest," she texted during a break. "And they're conservative viewers." I paced my dressing room, waiting for news. Hours crawled by. Finally, my phone rang. "They're letting me finish the documentary," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But with conditions." We met at my apartment, where Emerson explained the board's demands. Strict professional boundaries, separate coverage of shared events, regular ethics reviews. "Small price for freedom," she smiled, pulling me close. The media storm intensified. Local papers ran headlines about rival networks' love story. Industry blogs debated professional ethics. Conservative groups called for boycotts. But something beautiful happened too. Support flooded in from unexpected places. Other LGBTQ media professionals shared their stories. Viewers sent letters about their own hidden loves. "We're moving in together," I announced to my team the next day. More changes, more challenges, but it felt right. Emerson's apartment was closer to both stations, with a small garden reminiscent of our grandmother's. Boxes of memories, both old and new, filled the space. "Rose and Catherine would love this view," Emerson said as we unpacked. The Scottsdale sunset painted the sky in defiant colors. The vintage camera found its place on our mantle, surrounded by photographs spanning generations. No more hiding, no more secrets. That night, lying in our bed, we read media coverage of our coming out. Some called it controversial, others groundbreaking. We called it freedom. "Think we'll lose viewers?" I asked. Emerson kissed my forehead. "Think we'll gain something more important." Outside, the city hummed with our story. Inside, we had everything: truth, love, and the courage to live it openly. The diary entry for that night read simply, "Today, love won." Rose's words, written decades ago, finally rang true. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more changes, more growth. But tonight, we celebrated the simple joy of being ourselves, together, in the light. The attic of Catherine's old house smelled of cedar and secrets. Emerson's parents were finally selling the place, and we'd come to collect the last of her grandmother's belongings. "Look at this," Emerson called from behind a stack of boxes. She held up a leather-bound album, its pages thick with time. More diaries. Different from Rose's, but telling the same story. Catherine's elegant script filled pages with unspoken love, matching the timeline we already knew. "April 15th, 1963, I read aloud. "Rose wore the blue dress today. She knows it's my favorite. Sometimes I think she does these things just to torture me sweetly." Emerson found a box of photographs beneath old Christmas decorations. Images of garden parties, charity events, school functions, moments where our grandmothers' paths crossed again and again. They coordinated their outfits, Emerson noticed, pointing to subtle matching details. "Look, same color schemes, complementary patterns." A smaller box contained pressed flowers, each labeled with dates matching diary entries. Rose's messages, preserved in botanical code. "Red Carnation, March 3rd, 1964, I read the label. "The day they first kissed," according to Rose's diary. "We spent hours in that attic, piecing together their parallel lives. Catherine had documented everything. Theater tickets from their secret meetings, receipts from their shared favorite cafe, even a napkin with Rose's lipstick print. They created their own love language," Emerson marveled, holding up a handkerchief embroidered with tiny roses. Everything meant something. The most stunning discovery came in an old jewelry box, 2 identical silver lockets never worn. Inside each, a tiny photograph, Rose in one, Catherine in the other. They couldn't wear them, I realized. But they kept them all these years. Thunder rolled outside as we continued exploring. The storm matched our mood as we uncovered more evidence of their carefully hidden love. "My darling Rose," one letter began, never sent. "Today I watched you in your garden, tending those magnificent roses. Each bloom reminds me of stolen moments, of kisses that taste like sunshine." Emerson's hands trembled as she read. We'd found our own love in that same garden, but freely, openly. Lightning illuminated the attic, casting shadows that seemed to dance like memories. In that flashing light, I could almost see them, young, beautiful, burning with hidden love. "There's more," Emerson said, pulling out a small diary from behind some books. This one was different, written in Catherine's later years. "I see them together now, our granddaughters," the entry read. "Trinity has Rose's fire, her fearlessness. And my Emerson, so much like I was. Please let their story be different." Tears fell as we read. They'd known about us, watched us grow up, hoped for our happiness. The storm grew stronger, but we stayed, surrounded by their memories. Each discovery brought them closer: movie tickets, dried corsages, coded notes passed in library books. "They lived entire lives in margins," Emerson said softly, "always in the spaces between what was allowed and what was real." We gathered the treasures carefully: diaries, photographs, pressed flowers. These weren't just artifacts anymore, they were pieces of a love story that had paved the way for ours. In the garden later, rain finally stopping, we laid out our discoveries. 2 lives lived in parallel, always reaching, never quite touching. "We should add these to the documentary," I suggested. "Show how their love survived." Emerson nodded, then pulled me close. We swayed together in the wet garden, surrounded by roses that held decades of secrets. "No more hiding," she whispered, echoing words we'd said before. But here, among their memories, they held new meaning. The lockets now hang in our bedroom, a reminder of love's evolution. Their story, once written in invisible ink, now shines in full color through us. That night, we added our own entry to the collection of memories, not in hidden diaries or pressed flowers, but in the open air of the garden they loved. The documentary premiere coincided with Scottsdale's annual film festival. Fitting, since our story had begun here, in this city of secrets and blooming roses. And the award for Best Documentary goes to... The envelope opened slowly. "Hidden Blooms, A Legacy of Love" by Emerson Price. The audience erupted as we walked to the stage together, hands clasped. Emerson's speech was beautiful, thanking our grandmothers for their courage, their love, their legacy. But the real celebration came after, in a place that held special meaning. We'd rented the entire flea market where we'd first met, transforming it into a magical evening space. "Remember this spot?" Emerson asked, leading me to the table where we'd both reached for that vintage camera. The camera sat there now, surrounded by roses of every color. No more secret messages needed. Around us, scenes from the documentary played on vintage screens. "We have an announcement," I addressed our gathered friends and family. "Emerson and I are starting our own production company." The news was met with cheers. After months of navigating rival networks, we'd decided to forge our own path. Like our grandmother's flowers, we'd grow something new together. Price Brown Productions, Emerson revealed the logo, specializing in untold love stories. My mother hugged us both, tears in her eyes. She'd come so far from that tense Thanksgiving dinner. Now she wore a brooch that had belonged to Catherine, a gift from Emerson. The vintage market twinkled with fairy lights, each stall holding memories from our journey. The book corner where we'd found more diary pages. The jewelry stand that reminded us of the hidden lockets. "One more surprise," Emerson whispered, leading me to the center of the market. There, surrounded by candlelight, she knelt. The ring she held wasn't new, it was Catherine's, meant for Rose but never given. "Trinity Brown, will you write the next chapter with me?" My yes echoed through the market. Above us, stars twinkled like the tears in our eyes. Around us, love stories old and new intertwined. We signed the production company papers that night, right there on the table where we'd first touched hands. Our first project, adapting Rose and Catherine's story for the screen. "To new beginnings," my father toasted, finally fully accepting us. "And to love that refuses to hide." The celebration moved to the garden, their garden, now ours. Rose's flowers bloomed under moonlight, witnessing another milestone in their legacy. "Look what I found," Emerson said later, holding up a newly discovered diary page. Their last entry, written together. The words blurred through happy tears. "To those who find this story, love boldly, love openly, love without fear." We danced under stars, surrounded by vintage cameras and blooming roses. Two love stories, separated by time but connected by courage, finally finding their happy ending. The documentary would go on to win more awards. Our production company would tell more hidden stories. But that night, in the flea market where it all began, we simply celebrated love's evolution. "Ready to go home?" Emerson asked as the party wound down. Home. Our apartment filled with memories old and new, where vintage cameras shared space with modern equipment, where diaries sat beside scripts. "Almost," I said, taking one last look around the market. At the table where fate had brought us together, I placed a single red rose. No more secret messages needed, no more hidden meanings, just love, blooming boldly in the open air. We left hand in hand, stepping into our future. Behind us, the vintage camera watched over the market, its mission complete. Not just carrying love notes between Rose and Catherine, but bridging generations, connecting hearts, creating legacy. Some stories end, others transform, bloom anew. Ours was just beginning.